Now, without any further delay, I'd like to turn today's Autodesk webcast over to our presenter, Anthony Governanti. Anthony, you have the floor.
Righty. Thank you for the introduction, and hello to everyone. We don't have a lot of PowerPoint that we're going to be going through today. Today we will be looking at sheet creation or sheet set creation with Civil 3D. And I just really want to jump right in and actually go into doing a demonstration and get started right off with that. So if you want to just bear with me a moment here, I'm going to just get some applications shared out here. So again, just bear with me as I get set up properly. And what we're going to be doing today is essentially taking a look at two different methods or methodologies for working with generating sheets or plan sets in Civil 3D. So now we should be, hopefully the sharing's up and running now, and you should be able to see my desktop, or at least my Civil 3D 2006. So as I said, we're going to be looking through two different methods. And what I'd like to first start with is something that ships with every Civil 3D, is the fact that we're built on AutoCAD and AutoCAD 2006, and we're going to utilize the Sheet Set Manager in AutoCAD 2006 and go through some of the things we can do to set up the Sheet Set Manager and get that to work for us in a civil environment. And be able to have it automatically, or not so much automatically, but ease the creation of our sheets. And then I'd like to take a look at something else that's also built in Civil 3D, which is Map. And Map has a new feature this year with Map 3D 2006 called Map Books. And it's a feature that they've revamped for this release. And it actually takes advantage of Sheet Set Manager, but automates the layout of our plans a little bit more. So again, we're going to take a look at using Sheet Set Manager, and then taking a look at Map Books itself. Well, let's just start out. The first thing I really want to talk about is we have a fairly simple design here, a small subdivision with a road and a profile and everything, and we generated some cross sections for that road design. And really, what I want to point out is that if we want to compare or talk to some of our legacy products like Civil Design and Land Desktop, and the feature that was in Civil Design for sheet creation was called Sheet Manager. The Sheet Manager really went through and allowed you to set it up so that you could almost fully automate the cutting and laying out of plan profile sheets or cross-section sheets. Right now in Civil 3D 2006, we don't have anything that's as automated as what we had in Sheet Manager and Civil Design. It is something we're aware of, and I believe it's something we'll be working on for the future. So what I really wanted to do with this webcast is just show some of the tools that not necessarily automate the layout of these sheets, but make it a lot easier for somebody to lay these sheets out and have a consistent standard and a consistent format when they lay them out. So what I'm going to do is use some fairly simple examples, but hopefully you can use those as a takeaway as to what I can use in Sheet Set Manager and also what I can use in Map Books. With that said, let's take a look at generating some cross-section sheets. And so I've got cross-sections created in Civil 3D, and the first thing I want to point out is that Civil 3D lays out these cross-section sheets for you automatically. So what we can do is come in to our tool space here, and if we come over to our settings tab, I'm just going to scroll down real quick and take a look at our section views, and we'll see we have something called a group plot style. And there's two different ways you can group plot your section views. You can either just plot them all at once, and it'll just do a column and row situation, or you can actually set up a page. I just want to quickly take a look at that setup and show you how I got to this point. So for this group plot style, I've set it up so that I'm going to actually array the sections themselves, the section views, by rows, and have a maximum amount of sections in a row of 3. I can also do it by columns. Then I also set up the spacing between those sections. So as we can see here, I've just set up a basic 5 vertical grids by 5 horizontal grids. And we can see there that spaces out our cross-sections fairly nicely on that sheet. Then we have a concept of plot area for those sheets. So the idea of I'm going to have a certain sheet size, and again, this is customizable as well. In this case here, I'm going to work with a sheet size of a D, which is a 24 by 36. So that's essentially the plot by page setup there. It's a style we can apply when we do multiple views. And so that's what I've done here is I've plotted out our cross sections for this design, and it so happens that it's created 3 pages, if you will, of sections in the drawing. Well, why I really wanted to point that out is that this is powerful, and the way that we've set up this style here with this green and yellow frame, that is going to correlate to what we might want to have on our title block, the yellow frame being where we're actually going to plot the cross sections, the green frame being maybe the outer extents of our title block. Again, all set up in that style. So what I'll do is take advantage of those frames being there for the use in Sheet Set Manager. First thing I'll do is, in order to get Sheet Set Manager to work, is you actually set up an AutoCAD view. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to type V at the command line to get our view dialog box. Then I'm going to say, let's create a new view. I'll name this view Sections 1. And then instead of just saying the current display, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, let's define a window. And this is where I'm going to use that frame that comes out of the plot by page style. And now I've got a current view set up for that first section page. And I'll just simply repeat for the other 2. So again, I'm going to define a window and use our O-snaps. You can see that I can do this fairly quickly here and get the 3 views I need set up in order to create then our Sheet Set Manager sheets. There we have it. Now I've got 3 views. And the interesting thing about these views is we can also set up a layer state in these views. So we can tell it to save a layer state. So if I have certain information that I don't want in these views when I plot, no plot type situations, I can have that captured in the actual view itself. And also our UCS, so on and so forth. So you can see here, we've got it checked on that we're going to use the layer state it was saved with, and what's our UCS, so on and so forth. So now I've got those 3 views saved. I'll go ahead and save my drawing here. Let's go now and take a look at setting up a section sheet, or excuse me, a sheet set. So I've opened up Sheet Set Manager, and you'll see it's a tool palette that gets loaded here. I've done that simply by selecting it from the from the toolbar here, and I believe you can also get to it from the general menu. What I'll do is just come in and say, let's create a new sheet set. There's a couple different ways. If it's the first time you've ever done a sheet set, you can go through and just work with an example. Or if you have some drawings like we have here, I'm going to go ahead and choose from some existing drawings. I'll simply select Next. Go ahead and give this thing a name. I'll go ahead and call it Cross Sections. And I can add a description, so on and so forth. I can also put in where I want to store the actual data files for this sheet. And in this case, I'm going to do it locally, but I think in a true project environment, you would do this up on a network, either with your project files or maybe in a location that just your drafting folks will get to, so on and so forth. And then we want to take a look at actually generating our sheet set properties. And this is an important step because this is where we're going to come in and say where are data files stored, but also where are resource drawings. So the drawings that I'm actually going to pull data from to create my sheets for. So I'll go ahead and browse out and choose a location. And in this case here, I've got my folder under my projects for this webcast today where I've stored the drawing we're working with. I can also get into, in this situation here, there's a lot of, I think, power in Sheet Set Manager for how it'll actually do some labeling for blocks and callouts and things like that. I don't want to get too deep into that because we're not really training on Sheet Set Manager today. But the idea is here's where we can define where we get our blocks for views and where do we get callouts and so on and so forth. Also, where do we get our page setups? So this can come from a template where maybe we're storing all of our page setups that has our plotter configurations, our color configurations, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to go browse to my template folder where I store my templates. And what we'll see here for this example, I'm actually going to use some templates that ship with the product under our sheet sets folder in our template folder. We have one here set up for Civil Imperial. I'll go ahead and open that. So we're going to grab our page setups from that. And now I can have some specific project information here. What's the project number? What is the name? In this case, this subdivision is Maplewood. Does it have a certain phase? So on and so forth. Do we have any milestones? Maybe it's the 60% submittal. I type properly here. 60% submittal, so on and so forth. Then we get back to some information for the sheets that we create. Where are we going to put those? So in this case here, I can actually differentiate between where I'm storing the data. In this case, it can be local as far as what sheets are being created. And then I can put the actual drawings that are created somewhere else, so up on a network, so other people can get to them for plotting and for other uses. I'm just going to stick with the same folder there. And then here's that template. So this is where it's physically getting our title block and our settings for the drawing that will be created for the sheet. And so again, I just want to make sure I select the proper one. In this case here, I'm going to go grab that same Civil Imperial template. And you'll see that it shows us all the layouts that are in that template. We're just going to work with that B size template. Now I've got my property set up the way I want. I can come in now and say, well, where are we going to pull from our resource drawings again, and what layouts? Do I have specific layouts I want to work with? So again, I'll just pull from that. Now we're done. It gives us a nice summary of what we've done, and I'll finish. And you'll see now that I've got my sheet set created, and it's actually pulling from some other drawings that I had open or in that folder, some other layouts that were created. But what I want to do is come in now and say, well, I want to generate new sheets for these cross-sections. So I'll say a new sheet. I have the ability to name that, so let's just call it 1-cross sections. And we'll see that that's now in our list. It's part of our subset in the sheet set manager. I'll right-click and select Open on that, and we'll see what it did for us. It created a drawing from a template, in this case, that Civil Imperial one. And it has our title block in there. That title block has attributes and values that we can go ahead and fill in. And now we can just start off with a nice blank drawing and start to populate this with data. And this is where I think the real power in Sheet Set Manager comes in, is that I can quickly create these sheets and now add data to them. So what I'll do is change to the Resource tab of Sheet Set Manager, the Resource Drawings tab. As I expand that out, I'll see my original drawing here, the cross-sections drawing, and there's those three views that I defined earlier. I'll go ahead and select one of those views and simply just drag and drop it into this new drawing. What's going to happen here is it's going back to that resource drawing, looking at that AutoCAD view, and is actually going to create a viewport in my current layout for that view. And what I can do is right-click here upon insertion and actually pick a scale for that viewport. So in this case, I want to work with 1:40. And now when I select an insertion point, it goes out X references in, so we're using AutoCAD technology again, the XRef Manager. It's going to externally reference in that resource drawing of cross-sections and now cut that actual viewport into that XRef. So now we have that information in this drawing as an XRef, and we can see that I've got my cross-section set up for me. So here we're looking at 4+00. We've got all the annotation that comes in with those cross-sections right here in the sheet. And so now it's just simply a matter of, let's go ahead and repeat the process for our other two sheets. So again, I'll go New Sheet. We'll go ahead and give this a name. Again, cross-section. Actually, I want to make it 2. And we'll see, again, I can just right-click and select Open. So the idea here, I think, is really that this is certainly a task that not necessarily your project engineers would do or your project managers would do. This is really in the realm of some drafting tasks, but we can use these tools to start to automate that drafting in that the base plan is done, and we've used all our model-based technology over there to create that base plan, and now we can start to use Sheet Set Manager to reference that base plan into our final cut sheets. Again, just back to our resource drawings, I'll drag in Sheet 2. And once it's in here, we'll right-click and set the scale again. 1:40, and then I'll just pick a point here, make sure we get it on our screen. And now that we have this done, we can take our sheet set, and I'll just wait for it to finish regenerating here. Now that we have this done, we can actually come back to our sheet list here, our sheet set, and we can do certain things with it. We can go ahead and archive the information. We can transmit this information if we're sharing it with somebody. But really what I think is powerful is that we can come in and start to publish this information. And we can publish that as a DWIF. We can publish that to a plotter, so on and so forth. And again, that's where we're pulling those page setups. So this is all just automated. I just one click here, select publish, and now it's going to take all of my sheets and send them either to a plotter or to our DWF. So what I'm going to open up here is DWIF Composer, and we'll see that here is those same sheets actually in a DWIF. So I can ship this off to the contractor, I can ship it off to my project engineer who needs to take a look at these and redline them, so on and so forth. So a pretty simple process, I think, but something I really want to point out in that we have the tools already there in Civil 3D. They were there with 2005, and they're there with 2006 to take advantage of being able to do production drafting with the product, not just all the fancy modeling and 3D stuff that we love to show. But we can take this and actually start to do some production drafting. So that's, that's Sheet Set Manager. What I'd like to take a look at now is actually using the map tools that are in Civil 3D. And let me just get some drawings closed down here. So now I'm going to open up, it's essentially the same drawing, but I've set it up in this case here to take advantage of our map book functionality as we get this opened up. So again, as I mentioned earlier, Civil 3D is built on Map 3D 2005, and it has pretty much all the same components that Map 3D 2005 has. And we've done that, and I think some of you are probably already familiar with this, but there's a map menu right here in Civil 3D. What I want to point out is if we go down to the Utilities menu, there's a task pane. And so this used to be known as the workspace. This is now the task pane and map. And we have a couple things here. We have the Map Explorer, which is, I think, kind of familiar for us, if anybody who used map. It has the workspace stuff that we've worked with. There's also thematic or map display tab that we can have. And the new one here is the map books tab. And so what map books will do is take the Sheet Set Manager technology that we just looked at and automates it a little bit more. It allows us, it's really geared towards generating large sets of maps in a grid. So are we going to grid things out sequentially, so on and so forth. But what I'd like to show here is thinking a little bit outside the box with that technology and showing how we can apply that in the civil space to generating the same sheets we just looked at. But before I do that, the way the technology works is it actually uses a grid that we can lay out. And it'll lay out that grid for us, which you'll see when I do it for a site plan. But in this case here, since I've already got my frames, if you will, set up for my cross sections, I'm just going to go in and actually physically create a polyline for it to reference. But just using OSnaps and an AutoCAD polyline, I'm just going to trace out this frame here. And now I have 3 frames defined that we'll use in our map books. So let's do that. Let's go through the interface. We have some nice buttons here as far as the user interface goes, where we can go. It's pretty obvious what we're going to do. We can either create some new things, we can zoom around, we can look at different views, and then we can go publish that information. We'll come in and select New Map Book. And we get a dialog that comes up that's kind of a wizard, and a wizard in the idea of all our settings are right here, and we can just jump through and get the ones we want, but not necessarily a typical Windows wizard where we have a next button. It's really just working from the top to bottom through all these radio buttons. So the first thing I'll do is say we'll go ahead and name this thing. So let's just call this cross sections. But I'll call it MB for map books. And then we'll look at the settings. So very similar to when we first created the sheet set, I had to go in and define some settings and some properties. I'm doing that same thing here, where what's the template we're going to work with. And here I've got one set up for map books, cross sections. And then what layout in that template are we going to work with. And now here's some of the newer information or some of the automation that comes in here. What title block are we going to use? So it just pulls from the blocks in that template. And now there's something here called an adjacent sheet link, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute. But essentially this is a block that we can define that will allow us to set up multiple layouts and then be able to jump between those layouts according to if they're adjacent to each other or not. Last kind of setting here is a scale factor, so we will put in that 40 scale factor. And now we'll jump to our tiling scheme. So this is the automation that I talked about. How do we want to tile our sheets? Do we want to do it by an area? So if I had a city block that I wanted to create maps for, this is where I just pick an area, and then it would automatically tile out according to that scale we just set, the size of the frames for the viewports. Do I just have a number? And if I know that I want to work with, a grid that's 10 by 10, I'll go ahead in here and set the columns to 10, the rows to 10, and just give it a starting point to lay those out. And then there's custom, which is the one we're going to take advantage here as a civil engineer, in that we're going to come in and select those frames I just created, those polylines, as the new tiles for our grid. So I select those 3 cross-section frames, and now you'll see we've got 3 selected. I'm also going to choose to have 0 overlap on these because of the way they're laid out using the cross-section plot by page. We'll come into, we now have the opportunity, well, how do you want to name these layouts, these sheets that we're going to create? Do we want to begin with rows or columns, and how do we order that, top to bottom, left to right, so on and so forth? And so we have things, do we start with letters or numbers? How do we increment it, so on and so forth? The other thing we can do is come in and just do a grid. So if we did do a grid, and we'll see this a little later, how do I name that? 0 to 1, 1 to 5, so on and so forth. There's also this concept of data-driven. So if you're at all familiar with map or with the way map is set up with object data, we can come in and actually pull an expression or pull from some of the object data. Maybe it's a street block name, maybe it's a phase name for the subdivision, so on and so forth. Because we're not working with a true map book, we're not going to do a key or a legend, but we do have the ability to add in a key or a legend, and that really, I think, speaks more towards a mapping functionality. Now I think I'm set up the way I want. I want to do, again, naming by columns and rows, and what I'll do is just go ahead and generate the sheets. And let's see here, I think I just named it wrong, so bear with me for a second. Fine. Again, okay. Bear with me a moment. I missed pick a name in there somewhere, so let me just go through and try this again. And we want to make sure we get our title block and our adjacent block and a scale factor of 40. And we're going to do a custom tiling scheme where we'll select those three. That should do it for me. Let's see. Nope. Grid naming scheme. Oh, that's, sorry. I'm doing a mispick here. Bear with me again here. I'll just get it set up properly the first time. Block. Adjacent block. Okay, so what I need to do, custom. And let me just make a change here to make sure properly. Somehow it's keeping, when I looked at the grid sequential, it's keeping that setting for some reason. Work for me. You know, we can also preview these tiles. So as I go through, it's highlighting, yep, those are the ones you selected. And again, I'll just keep my fingers crossed that it's going to work this time. There we go. Oh, still can't get it to work. Alrighty. So bear with me a moment here. Sorry about this. I have one setting somewhere that's getting in my way. I think I've got one open. Yeah, here we go. All right, well, I don't want to waste people's time here with some sort of mispick that I'm making. But the idea here is what the map book does for us is instead of having to go manually create those sheets in each drawing, an X reference in the information, what it'll do is physically create the layouts right here in our drawing. So it's kind of two different methods using Sheet Set Manager. Do I want to use an XREF technology and have a separate drawing for each layout? Or do I want to use the map book technology where I can come into this drawing and have layouts created for me, each of those layouts being right there in that drawing and pulling from information in that model space? What I do have is the DWIF version of that. What should have done for me is created the layouts this way. And what I wanted to point out was the fact that we have these block arrows that are added as part of that map book. And this allows me to go ahead and jump to an adjacent layout. So in this case here, we've got three in a row, one on either side of each other, and I can simply use the control button here and jump to those in our sheet set or in our map book. This is very powerful for when we're working with large amounts, right? This is a fairly simple example here where we only have three layouts that we've created. But if I have large amounts and I've tiled them in a way where they're on top of each other or so on and so forth, I can jump to those sheets that are adjacent to each other. So again, Mapbooks, same functionality where we can then come in and publish it out. So that's what I've done here is I've published out that DWIF. So let's go in now and try that same method, and I'll see if I can get it to work, working with more of a site plan. So we'll go to this one here. So again, same design. I've just created some separate drawings. And let's say that I actually want to lay out my map book for a site plan. And so what we'll see here is I'll just come in and say New Map Book. We'll use a little bit different settings this time. I'll call it the site plan. And I'll go out and grab my template that I've got set up for the site plan. It's a little bit different title block. And that same adjacent. And in this case, for the scale factor, I'm actually going to go with a 60 instead of a 40 to make those fit a little bit better. Tiling scheme. In this case here, we're going to use the by number tiling scheme. And so I'm going to pick an upper left, and I'm just going to do columns and rows. So let's just go in and pick. I've actually just got a quick line in there to kind of help me with the demo piece. And now that I've got that laid out, let's just preview the tiles. And you'll see that I've actually created one too many columns of tiles, right? So I've got 3 columns of tiles and 3 rows of tiles. Maybe I need one less. So I'll go ahead back and make that change. We'll do 2 columns but 4 rows, and again, preview those tiles, and now you'll see that we're getting all of our design laid out for us. And we'll come in to, again, we don't have a key or a legend, and let's just see if I can get these generated without the error. There we go. Okay. So this time it worked for me. And you'll see over here in our map book layout, it's created that map book for us, and we've got our grid and our columns of layouts created, and they're all right here in the drawing. So let's just go ahead and select one of these. Nice functionality here right from MapBooks. I can either zoom to the tile, so now we can take a look at that tile in the drawing, or I can actually zoom to the layout, and we'll see what it's done here for us for that layout. So I've got my title block for my site plan in here, and I've got some attributes coming in. I've got some notes and things like that. But I've also got those same links now where I can take a look at and say, well, let's say I want to see the next sheet, but I want to see the one adjacent to this corner here. I'll just go ahead and select that, and it automatically jumps me to the appropriate layout for that sheet, so on and so forth. So as I go through and take a look at the different sheets jumping around, you'll see that now we're going to C5, and let's maybe come up back to the one we were looking at, because what I wanted to show is that not only did it automatically lay out these grids for us, but it did size them appropriately. So as I double-click in this viewport, you'll notice I have the AutoCAD's viewport toolbar here. We'll see that it is that 1 to 60. So the scaling is happening for us, and the powerful thing with Civil 3D, as many of you probably know already, is that our annotation is automatically scaling for us appropriately to that viewport scale. So I'm always going to have the correct plotted text height for our annotation, and it's always going to orient properly for whatever view we're looking at. So really that's kind of what I wanted to show there with MapBooks. We can then come in and take a look at zooming. We'll come back to the zoom tiles. Let's say that I wanted to make any changes to this setup. I can come in now to the MapBook, now that it's been created, right-click here and come in and choose Edit Settings and Rebuild. So if I want to come in now and let's say we're just going to do, let's see here, 3 rows, so on and so forth, maybe pick a little bit different starting point to kind of orient us a little bit better. And now we'll go ahead, we can preview the new tiles. You can see that it's set those off a little bit differently for us. And then I'll go ahead and regenerate. We can overwrite the existing layouts as well as that map book that's been created. And see, what you'll see here is that this is a map book here, but it also is saved as a sheet set for our sheet set manager. So we can actually go out and use those same tools if I'm a drafts person on plain AutoCAD, or another person using Civil 3D that's just doing the sheet layout. They can use Sheet Set Manager, and now that this map book has been created, it saves it as a sheet set. So those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about. The other thing, as far as working with map books, and so let's touch on really, I think, some of the holes in Civil 3D for sheet layout. We can do cross-section sheets in 2 different ways here. We saw it with Sheet Set Manager. We saw it with map books. Well, not really, but you'll have to trust me on that one. And we also saw it for site plans. So the idea of whether it be a subdivision design or a large mall or some sort of site design where you need to cut up your sheets, but they're all sequential. They're on a grid format. MapBooks is really a powerful feature to allow us to automatically lay out that grid and automatically cut our layouts. Now if we want to talk about plan profile sheets a little bit, we don't, MapBooks, unfortunately, the way MapBooks is set up, it only is going to allow us to cut one viewport in our layout at a time. So when we talk about plan profile sheets, that's where we're going to have to come in and do a little bit more manual things. What we could do is set up our frames here. If I wanted to, go from a certain value here, I could set up a frame to represent that first profile cut and set those frames up and physically draw out those frames and get them placed where I need them. And then use the same methods I just went through for cross sections to find those new frames, those polylines I've drawn, as tiles, and then have it at least generate all our profiles for us. We could then come back in and add in our viewports for our plan and orient those appropriately in order to get not necessarily a fully automated step, but a little bit more automated layout of our plan profile sheets. So, I apologize for that one little hiccup there that didn't take as much time as I wanted to. We're getting towards the end of what I wanted to present today. The idea is I'm kind of going solo today. Normally with these webcasts we have somebody online answering questions as we go. But since I've been going solo, I wanted to leave a little bit more time towards the end to actually look at our any questions we may have. So let me just jump back over to my interface here. And here, let's just take a look at our question manager here. So let me go through and see if I can answer some of these questions that we have posted, and then we'll go ahead and open up the lines here in a minute. So, can a connectivity between sheets from mapbooks translate to DWF Viewer? Yes, and I don't know if you got to see that during the presentation, but in the DWF Viewer, that same adjacent block will work. So the idea of I can just hit the control button and click on one of those arrows, that'll work through the DWF Viewer as well. Again, if you've got a really large set of plan sheets or cross-section sheets, very powerful there for somebody you're sharing with. You don't have to send them the drawings. You can send them the DWF Viewer. I think I mentioned plan profile sheets a little bit. There was one question there about that. Again, we can use map books to help set up at least the profile segment or the plan segment, either one you want to do. I really recommend the profile one because it's easy to lay out those grids, and then come back later and add in your view port for your plan. Another one here, when you jump to an adjacent sheets generated by the map books, does the title block info update accordingly? Yes, that's something about the values that are added into those title blocks. It pulls the sheet name, if you will, or however you can actually set it up to either pull the sheet name, the sheet number, so on and so forth. So as I jump through those DWFs, title block 1 is named, sheet 1 is actually in the title block named 1, so on and so forth. So that does correlate. Let's see here. There's another one. The error states that it cannot use grid name method with sequential work. Yeah, I think that was my problem there, was trying to pick I should pick sequential instead of grid name. So I apologize for missing that little step there. So 2000, another question here is, are we built on Map 3D 2005 or 3D 2006? Because the Civil 3D aligned with the launch of all of the 2006 products, we're built on all of the 2006 products. So we have AutoCAD 2006 there, and we have Map 3D 2006 there. I know with the last release, since we were about mid-year there, we actually were off cycle a little bit. So now we're building on the same version of Map 3D 2006 as the correct version, if you will, this year's version. Let's see here. The functional example just created will be of little use unless it includes the ability to set the rotation similar to Deep View Twist. I agree with that statement. There is map books, the one, I think, I wouldn't say downfall, but the way they've implemented map books, because it's really working in this world of maps and world coordinates, you can't rotate your orientation. And that's when I said, when we cut plan profile sheets, use map books to lay out the profile, because that's oriented properly to your UCS, so on and so forth. So I would agree with the statement that it's not as useful is more of a twist on that there if we can't orient it differently. But again, I think it's just, so it'll help us in laying out many sheets. It'll get us that much closer than having to do it manually. Again, not a complete replacement for what we had in civil design with Sheet Manager there, but I think getting us a lot closer in that we can start to automate some of the process. Let's see here. Can you have multiple profile views in one sheet? Most certainly. With the idea of I'm just manually drawing in, or if I do lay out a grid, the idea of I just lay that grid out so it encompasses multiple views. And so that'll take care of that. And where do we get this adjacent block? The details of the adjacent block is, yes, it'll plot. You can put it on a no-plot layer if you don't want it to plot. And really what the adjacent block is doing is it's taking advantage of the AutoCAD fields. So the idea of when we go set up the template for the map books, we can take any block. So it's any shape that we want. It doesn't have to be an arrow. It could be anything. And then we add an attribute to that block that is an AutoCAD field. And when you do that in the map books, in map, there's actually a set of values you pull from map books to be able to grab the adjacent sheet. And it's a value right in there in the field picker for map books adjacent sheet. And so you define that block to use that value. And as I said, that block can be anything. We just happen to pick a kind of a fancy triangle there. Again, working with the AutoCAD fields and be able to pull those values. Same thing happens on that title block. Those values that are in there, those are fields that can actually pull properties from our sheet set or from our map books. Okay. So I think I answered all the online questions. So, operator, if we want to open it up for actual voiced questions or online on the phone questions, that'd be great.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. You'll be prompted to record your name for proper pronunciation. And that is *1 if you'd like to ask a question. Don't be one moment, please. We have a question from Don Reichel.
Yes, hello. Hi, Anthony.
How you doing?
Nice show so far.
All right, thank you.
And the classic example that I want to introduce is where you have a short cul-de-sac, and it makes sense to put two of them on one sheet in plan view and then in profile. And I understand the limitations of the view twist, but for aligning the two profiles, they're probably going to be in different parts of the model space. So I guess to cut to the chase here, my question is, the viewports that are produced by the map books are adjustable. You can unlock them, move around, pan around, and get the proper view that you want, correct?
Yes, that is correct. If we use that custom method like I used with the cross sections, where we're actually just taking a polyline that we've drawn, a rectangle, if you will, and we're defining that as the frame or the tile. Mm-hmm. What I can do is just come in and move that tile and regenerate, and it'll pull that new location for that tile.
Okay, but I think I'm hearing you say that you really can't. It's tied into the tile, and so you can't perform view twists or whatever after you're done?
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't understanding you. You can, after it's cut the initial sheet for you, you can go right in, and it's just a regular viewport at that point. Okay. You can rotate and everything. Just know that if you go and regenerate the map book for whatever reason, I think it's going to go ahead and reset that viewport to that tile.
So then after you're got the placement and the rotation proper, you should delete the tile?
I don't know if you actually need to delete the tile. But yeah, that'll probably lose the connection then. Yeah, you can delete that tile.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd have to play with it myself. I haven't tried that yet.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
And again, as a reminder, that is star one if you'd like to ask a question. Star one. One moment. And at this point, gentlemen, I show no questions.
Alrighty. Well, we lost a little bit of time in the middle there when I wanted to show a little bit more with that cross-section one that worked, if it worked. No major deal. We saw it working with our site design at least. So hopefully you get the idea of two, I think, pretty important tools for us to look at when we're going to go do our planned production drafting in Civil 3D. And so it's really an effort here to just kind of dispel any rumors or any myths that Civil 3D can't do production drafting. We have the Sheet Set Manager tools that are there, and we can also take advantage of all the AutoCAD fields and attributes there, as well as the very powerful feature of Autodesk Map 3D map books, which is really something we can use for site design layout, sheet layout, as well as cross-section layout, and even half of our plan profiles. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I want to remind everybody that we do have another webcast next week, same time, same place. So thank you, everybody, for attending.
Great. Thanks, Anthony, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending as well. This now concludes today's Autodesk Civil 3D webcast. You may now all disconnect.